Despite Kentucky being 10-1, there are multiple ways that Mark Pope's Cats can get better.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be diving into the different ways that I believe Kentucky basketball can get better. Obviously, the Cats are 10-1, and they're playing pretty good basketball, but over these past several games, we've seen some weaknesses and some frustrations that I want to point out and explain how Kentucky can improve them. Also, on today's episode, Kentucky football, taking a look at a couple of different big-time quarterbacks in the transfer portal, both of which who have played in the SEC before, at least if you count Texas as an SEC team during the time that Malik Murphy played there. And then to wrap up the show, we've got some updates on Bracketology, some very good ones for Kentucky and Mark Pope. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you're watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribe there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start your season with a big return on FanDuel because new customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if they win their first $5 bet. You can visit FanDuel.com there to get started. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. How can Kentucky basketball get better? I don't think Kentucky's hit their peak. In fact, far from it. Over these past few games, you've seen Kentucky struggle in a variety of areas, and yet the Cats, outside of the Clemson game, they've still found ways to win. And on top of this, they found ways to win without being fully healthy. Kerr Kriisa out indefinitely now. Lamont Butler was out for a couple of games with an ankle injury. They've still been able to go out there and put out relatively competent to really solid performances. The Louisville game was a massive dip in terms of defensive efficiency. Kentucky was ranked 29th on KenPom in that category before playing the Cards, now currently ranked 44th after the Cards just hit a lot of shots that they normally don't. I believe they hit 14 threes in that game. They got out, they played well, they scored a lot of points, and it really did hurt what Kentucky has been trending towards, which is being a lot better on that end of the floor than they were a season ago. I have some concerns on that side of the ball, but first I want to break this down into three different major points. Kentucky still hasn't hit their peak, and these are the three things that I think Kentucky can do to make themselves better. First and foremost, I think Kentucky can be a better three-point shooting team. This is, in Mark Pope's own words, the best shot-making team in the country. He believes he put that together this year. And if you look at what the guys were coming into this season on paper, it's really hard to disagree with that, especially whenever you go and look at different places like Synergy and you see what these guys were shooting in spot-up and catch-and-shoot situations. Kerr Kriisa, one of the best shooters in the nation in catch-and-shoot spots. He was in the 99th percentile. Kobe Brea, 100th percentile. He was the best catch-and-shoot player in the country last year. Kobe Brea shooting 53.1%, which is very, very good, but Kriisa only 26.3% from three. Otega Owe shooting 37.5%, which is right there in comparison to his average a season ago. Jackson Robinson shooting a few percentage points worse. You've got guys like Ainsley Almanor who are not shooting as good as they did a season ago, but still decent. Travis Perry is coming, and he's not played very well shooting the basketball. Colin Chandler is 3 of 12. You've got, different guys here like Brandon Garrison who are taking a bunch of different outside shots that frankly, I don't know if he should. He's only 1 of 7 this year. The volume guys that Kentucky has, which are right now Robinson and Brea, I think that you could be better shooting the three ball in a couple different ways. I think Robinson could find ways to be more efficient. I think that he rushes a lot of his shots in transition sometimes. And then I think Kobe Brea, you just give him more volume and you'll become a better three-point shooting team, at least in my opinion. I think he can handle some of those extra shots as opposed to Robinson, who seems to be inconsistent at best. 36.7% is what Kentucky is shooting right now as a team, according to KenPom. That's 73rd nationally. 364 teams in the country. That's really not bad when you think about it, 36.7%. But again, it can be better, and it can prevent some of these lulls that Kentucky has that really do start to put pressure on them as a team if you just shoot better from three, especially in the first half of play, which is the second point I want to get to here. I think Kentucky has to have better first half performances if they want to be a better team. And this goes for every aspect of the game. It's about not creating turnovers, it's about creating less turnovers in the first half. It's about grabbing more rebounds. It's about playing better in transition, having better shot selection, playing better rim defense. You have to be able to do all of these different things in the first half. And Kentucky, as good as they have been adjusting against teams like Duke, the Zags, Colgate here in one of the most recent games, they played well in the second half against Louisville. You're going to have to be able to come out hot more consistently, and you're going to have to be able to come out better, I think, out of timeouts. It's something that Kentucky has struggled with at various points as we get deeper and deeper into the non-conference slate. We're actually almost done with it now, with Ohio State and Brown being the only 2 games left, but you have to come out and you have to make better statements early instead of trying to claw your way back into games or trying to you essentially get past a poor first half performance by having a blowout second half and making a win against a mid-major school, I should say, making those type wins look pretty impressive instead of really impressive. You could be doing a lot more. I think that would contribute to things like your net rating, which is going to be incredibly important whenever you talk about seeding. We'll get to bracketology later on in the show. But again, three-point shooting, better first half performances. And then the thing that really bothers me about Kentucky's statistics here, and this is the only thing that they genuinely struggle with. If you look at numbers, Kentucky does a lot of different things really well. They don't turn the ball over themselves. They shoot well from 2. They shoot well from 3. They grab rebounds. On defense, they're one of the best three-point defenses in the country. They're still doing very well inside the arc, especially relative to last year. They prevent offensive rebounds. They make teams work for their points, despite having a very high tempo. Kentucky has to create more turnovers. Flat out, full stop. They are, as of right now, 340th nationally in turnover percentage. That is just simply not going to cut it. The Division I average, 17.8% of opponent possessions in a turnover. Kentucky's only 13.9. This, I believe, is the solution to Mark Pope's problem. We talked about this last season, and I need to pull up a tweet I just realized that I made last night. We talked about this last season when discussing Kentucky defensively and their issues. Because if you go and look at how they were performing statistically, they weren't doing all that poorly relative to national competition. But in the SEC, they were doing pretty bad. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that they just played with such a high pace and tempo that they were giving their opponents more possessions. Because Kentucky didn't really have to grab a ton of offensive rebounds, they just kind of made shots. Possessions ended fairly quickly, right? You either get a 3-up and you make it or you don't. And it allowed your opponents to have more possessions. And while your defense wasn't terrible in terms of percentages, teams were able to get more shots and then therefore make more shots, efficient or not, therefore more points than you would normally have. Kentucky has the same problem this year. The solution, in my mind, is just to simply create more turnovers because you're not going to slow down your pace if you're Mark Pope. It's one of the things that makes your offense what it is. You're not going to stop taking threes. It's one of the things that makes your offense what it is. So you have to do things a little bit better on the defensive end of the floor. They are already doing a phenomenal job holding teams to poor shooting numbers. They're top 30 nationally in effective field goal percentage. That's really, really good. It's just opponents are hitting shots because they have more opportunities to take them. Haslametrics is a really good website. If you don't like KenPom, if you don't like Evan Mia, if you don't like Torvik, you can go to Hasla, And they have a lot of, I believe, like not AI, but just generated different notes on teams just based on what their statistics are. It'll provide you a really in-depth breakdown. If you don't want to look at numbers, you can read what teams are good at and what they're poor at. And Hasla has some really interesting stuff about Kentucky defensively. And this is what their page says about the Cats currently. Quote, if Kentucky does exhibit a weakness on the defensive end of the floor, it'd likely be the team's propensity to allow too many shot attempts per trip. The squad has a rating of 90.73 in defensive field goal attempt rate versus average opponents, which ranks 27th worst nationally. I've been saying this before the season even started about asking the question, what does tempo do to you defensively if you cannot create turnovers? Because at BYU, Mark Pope's teams, they didn't. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I need to go find it. I believe we did an episode covering like statistical deficiencies that Mark Pope's teams have, despite him being known as a big time numbers guy. And this was like the big thing for me. And here we are, Kentucky 10-1. Their defensive issues not really there, but if they just created more turnovers, they'd be so dominant. They'd be so dominant. You have to be able to limit shot attempts. You have to find a way to do that. And then the final note I want to make here is another extremely important note from Hasla, and this is why we're talking about how can Kentucky get better today. Kentucky has definitely not been as efficient as of late compared to earlier in the season, and consequently, the team is nationally ranked fourth from the bottom in positive momentum. Kentucky fourth worst in the country right now on positive momentum, and yet the Cats are still 10-1. You can get away with it now. Can you get away with it in SEC play? I don't think you can. And those are the three ways I believe that Kentucky basketball can get better to prevent a collapse. All right, let's talk about Zach Calzada and Malik Murphy. Which would I rather have? We'll take a look at them. They're both taking a look at Kentucky football. Before we dive into that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at TNT because it's that time of the year, ladies and gentlemen. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup here, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns at a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. You don't want to miss a single moment of the action. You can watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. All right, continuing along here on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. We've got some football news to talk about. Kentucky football sucked this year. There's no other way to put it. They stunk. They're trying to retool. They've lost a lot of pieces to the portal. Barian Brown, LSU, Dane Key to, I believe, either Ole Miss or Georgia. That hasn't been decided yet for Key. You lost them. You lost a lot of pieces on the defensive side of the ball to graduation, and that defense was pretty freaking good, and you wasted it because your offense just couldn't do anything. And so Mark Stoops, has a lot of the Kentucky fan base frustrated right now, myself included. How do you remedy it? How do you go out and change things up heading into next season? Well, you got to go and get portal players. You got to get players that are better than the ones that you currently have on roster. Brock Vandegrift's not cutting it at quarterback. Just simply not. You are looking at some various pieces at running back. I think Jamarian Wilcox is good enough to play and start and play very well, but we'll see what they want to do with the ULM back. That's not what we're talking about today, though. Kentucky hosting two different quarterback prospects that I find interesting. Are they perfect? No, but interesting. First, we'll start here with Zach Calzada. Zach Calzada, in case you don't remember, was the quarterback in 2022 for the Texas A&M Aggies that beat, the 2021 Aggies that beat Alabama at home in College Station. Had a phenomenal game against the Crimson Tide. I'll try and pull this up here for you guys real quick. Against Alabama in 2021, 21 of 31, 3 touchdowns, a passer rating of 170.5, and just a gutsy performance. He if you go watch that game, layered in some throws over the top of the defense, found some guys wide open. He did everything. He clutched it out at the end to get Texas A&M in position to kick a game-winning field goal. This guy is gutsy, and he was really fun to watch. He was sporadic at times throwing the ball, but man, that Bama game, he locked in. He locked on. He that season finished the year with 19 passing touchdowns, 10 interceptions, completing 55.7% of his passes. As a freshman, I believe he had 2 touchdowns and 1 pick. But he started and played most of the season because of injury for the Aggies. And then he transferred out, and he transferred to Auburn. Calzada didn't play at all at Auburn because of injury and because of some weird stuff going on with the Tigers. And so he transferred out of there and went to Incarnate Word. And he was decent for an FCS quarterback this past season. It wasn't anything crazy. You know, he had his passing touchdowns. I think he had like 29. The numbers here aren't the big thing for me. He played well. He played well enough to show that, hey, I can still compete at the Division I level and most likely at the Power 4 level. You keep going back to that Bama game. You keep going back to that season with A&M, trying to come into just a bad situation with an offensively challenged coach and who was, I believe, going on his 3rd string QB with Calzada at that point. I think he made the most of the situation as a sophomore quarterback. He was good enough. I think having the experience he has now, if you were able to get him pieces, Calzada would be somebody that I would love to see at Kentucky. I'd like to see him at UK. However, there's another piece that Kentucky is also looking at that could be a bit of a gamble, but also played very well at the Power 4 level this year, and that is Maalik Murphy. Maalik Murphy initially started his career out at Texas, and he didn't do a ton at Texas, but he had one really important start against Kansas State, and he played well enough in that one. But Maalik Murphy transferred to Duke this past season, and he played well. I'll say that. He didn't play great, but he played well. He completed 60% of his passes for 26 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. He is 6'5", 230 pounds. This is a pure pocket passer who has insane arm strength and a really good deep ball. That is where I think the extreme positives stopping in for Murphy. He is inconsistent throwing the ball around the middle of the field. He is not mobile. He is not good in scramble situations. He's a little slow, but again, the arm, he's got a cannon. If Kentucky wanted to just ground and pound and then take shots downfield, I think somebody said this on Twitter, and he looks like a Terry Wilson type player to me. At least that's kind of what I see, except he's a taller Terry Wilson, which I think Kentucky would take, especially if their ground game is going to be better. Good, but also limited at Duke. There are upsides to both of these guys. Murphy, a really good downfield passer, but not phenomenal at everything else. Calzada has proven that he can play in the SEC, but was at Incarnate Word this last year and is still erratic a little bit as a passer as well. So who would you rather have? Let me know in the comments below. Kentucky's going to host both. We'll see what happens. We will see what happens. Personally, if I had to pick, I'd probably take Murphy if I knew that Kentucky was going to have a solid run game. If I didn't, would probably take Calzada. All right, Kentucky has some really good news in relation to bracketology. Boys, we've done it. I think this is the first time in the history of me doing this show that Kentucky is projected to be a 1 seed. We'll dive into it in just a little bit. Before I do that, though, tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel, because you can tackle the NFL action this season with America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if they win, because the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives them everything they need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks, because Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot up to win 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's daily fantasy sports app. You can make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks. It's the best place, again, to get money while watching your favorite sports. They now offer MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. They also invented the Flex Play, which is really cool. Means you can still cash out even if your lineup is not perfect, which I personally have really appreciated whenever I've kind of taken a dive into some different NFL more or less projections throughout the course of the season. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit, which has been really, really sweet, because I am not perfect when it comes to picking more or less, but I'm sure you guys are a little bit more knowledgeable than me. You can join now, because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're going to give away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. You can download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today, use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 immediately after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, wrapping up the Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. All right, so we've talked about football. We've talked about how Kentucky basketball can get better. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pulling it up right now. The Bracket Matrix, bracketmatrix.com is the place that you need to go, in my opinion, if you want to go take a look at what's going on across the country in terms of bracketology projections. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Kentucky's average seed across the internet. This is over 100 different bracket projections across the internet. Kentucky basketball is an average 1 seed. We've done it. As of right now, if the season ended today, Kentucky would be one of the 4 best teams in America. If I had told you that in the middle of the summer, I'm sure every single one of you would have taken that. Mark Pope is a good coach. He's a good coach. I think it'll be interesting to see how he does with a different roster next season. But he's recruiting very well, and he's going to have the opportunity to go back into the transfer portal again and to get some really, really good guys. But right now, Kentucky is pretty dang good. According to ESPN, who is always on something, Kentucky would play in Cleveland in the West region, and they would play either American or Hampton or some 16 seed. Hopefully you wouldn't lose to them. And if they won that matchup in the round of 32, they would either face number 8 seed Maryland or number 9 seed Arkansas, because apparently we just can't have Kentucky in the bracket without throwing them up against some opponent in the round of 32 that they've got a little history and some beef with. Would you like to see this? I've seen some differing opinions online about whether or not this would be a fun thing or it would be a horrifying thing. You can let me know in the comments below. Personally, not scared of it, especially having seen what Arkansas is. They're not terrible. I don't think they're as good as Kentucky, but they're not terrible. We'll see what happens there. St. John's, by the way, just keep tabs on them because I like Rick Pitino. They're a 7 seed. That is an upset waiting to happen. And in this bracket projection for ESPN and Joe Lunardi, they would be facing off more than likely against Alabama if they won their opening matchup against West Virginia. And West Virginia's good, but, man, St. John's would be, I think, a problem in the NCAA tournament. I'm probably going to end up picking them to go far at some point later on in the year because I am just biased. The other 1 seeds, though, if you want to look at how good the SEC is this year, Auburn is a 1 seed. Tennessee is a 1 seed. Kentucky is a 1 seed. Iowa State is the only non-SEC 1 seed. You look at the 2 seeds, you've got the Zags, you've got Alabama, you've got Duke, and Marquette. Your 3 seeds right now looking pretty solid as well. You've got Florida, you've got Texas A&M, you've got Oregon, and Kansas. Right now, the SEC, brace yourself. They have 13 teams that are projected to get into the field of 68. 13. What? I mean, are you kidding me? The SEC is about as good as I have ever seen it, and it may be the best it has ever been. Go, if you want to, you can go and look at, it doesn't matter what analytics site you look at. Auburn right now, their net rating on KenPom, adjusted efficiency margin, is 35.1. The next closest team, which is also an SEC school, is 30.95. This is the most dominant team that we have seen maybe in the KenPom era. I'm trying to go back. Okay, so 35.1. In 1997, Kentucky was 34.44. Next season, 34.88 for Duke. Next season, 43. Okay, so Duke in 1999 was objectively one of the most dominant teams ever. Let's see if we can find any others. Duke in 01. Keep it pushing, man. Kentucky's been really, really good in the net ratings, at least on KenPom. Yeah, as we wade deeper and deeper into 2010, 2011, 2012, you're not seeing teams that are even 3 or 4 points near Auburn's net rating. You see some teams that are just maybe slightly over it. You see that Duke team that was incredibly dominant in 1999. But this is one of the best years for the SEC, period. If Kentucky is able to steal some wins over some of these big-time teams like the Tigers, like Alabama, like Tennessee, you've got one of the strongest NCAA tournament resumes on the market. Kentucky is very much so in a position to be a 3 seed or a higher or higher. I love that, especially considering most projections had Kentucky at like a 6 or a 7 to begin the season. So let me know what you think in the comments below about Bracketology. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. You can hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.